When you're designing a new action figure line to appeal to young kids, the most important thing is to have your bad guys be reptile based. I mean, because everyone's afraid of reptiles, even Indiana Jones, and, even Disney embraces the reptile villain. Well, no different for Masters of the Universe. And when it came to playing with your Masters of the Universe figures, reptiles were a big part, even from the beginning. Tila was dressed as a reptile when she was the sorceress, and having a reptile buck was part of the system. Beast, human, and reptile was what the original bucks were called. Well, to have actual reptile figures, look no farther than the Snake Man. It didn't take too long in the line for the Snake Man to be introduced. Okay, well, they came towards the end. You can see a video about their creation here. But even before the Snake Men were introduced as villainous vipers and reptiles of the He-Man world, predating them came a single reptile villain, none other than Kobra Kahn. Yup, before the entire Snake Men made their way, there was one single snake-like character, and that was Kobra Kahn. The figure with the flapping out head pieces and mist-shooting fire breath thing, which was done as water, and of course the mix and match parts using guns and arms from existing figures. Well, much like most of Masters of the Universe classics. Kobra Kahn came out at about the middle of the vintage line, kind of right smack there in the middle, not too early, not too late, but he very, very quickly became a favorite among, well, a lot of fans, both of the good guys and the bad guys. And he's notorious to collectors because he's one of the few figures that was released in South America by Top Toys in a completely different deco, even given a different name, Camouflage Kobra Kahn. You can see more about Top Toys in the link here, but essentially they were Mattel's distributor in South America, in Argentina, and they recreated Kobra Kahn and gave him the Snake Men logo right there on his chest, which he actually did have in the licensor kit, which is interesting, although be it on his original deco. And then they also mixed and matched parts, giving him different arms. The packaging, like other Masters of the Universe figures in the Top Toys collection, had a very big, bright yellow sticker telling you who this character was, because, reasons. And of course, they weren't exactly always up on their spelling or their use of the correct marks, like how they spelled Skeletor with the pound sign for the L in the middle there. Because Skeletor likes stealing British money? I don't know. And of course, Kobra Kahn was not the only figure to get a slight redeco. Modulok got some green limbs in the Top Toys release, as well as the fact that he was released on a single card, considering that Modulok came in a box when he was released in the US market. So if you wanted him on a single card with green-colored limbs, hey, Top Toys is there for you. But Kobra Kahn, or the camo version of him with the buzz-off gripping arms and the yellow gold boots, well, hey, it's a definitely a beloved part of collecting Masters of the Universe, these oddities. And in fact, this version of Kobra Kahn was released in Classics as a PowerCon exclusive at the very tail end of Classics. This was actually after I left the brand and Super 7 had taken over, but under the guidance of Val Staples and the other runners of PowerCon, they were able to bring this sort of hard-to-find vintage foreign release to the Classics line. Alright, but that's a YouTube video for another time. Let's get back to standard Kobra Kahn and his road from vintage figure entertainment to the Classics line. So he did appear in the entertainment. He actually appeared in quite a lot of the entertainment. He was a reoccurring villain in the Filmation series with his sort of hood up and hood down, which was interesting because the toy had no hood at all. It had more this kind of head. Versus on the show, he would often flap open his Cobra hood because he is a Cobra, hence Kobra Kahn. See, it's right there in his name on his business card. And the toy, hoodless, but still very cool. I don't know, it probably was because of the action feature that he couldn't have the hood, I'm guessing, and we'll get into that in a moment. And it's also interesting to note that the feature wasn't quite the way it looked on the box, or even in the entertainment. So Kobra Kahn was one of two water squirting figures that were released in the vintage line, the other being, of course, the elephant in the room there. His powers were oddly defined in some of the entertainment. Sometimes he was shown as being able to control other serpents and other snakes, and in the Filmation series, he would look at you with his hypnotic gaze and shoot laser beams out of his eyes or mouth or stink rays. Either way, it wasn't water being vomited from his mouth the way it was meant to be with the action feature. He was kind of shooting yellow beams from his hood, from his eyes, from his mouth. I guess they came from everywhere, every orifice. Wait, I said too much. Well, the idea that he was more spitting at you was really what the toy did, not the entertainment. And this really isn't how it looked when you actually did it compared to the art. Functionally, it was done with a pump mechanism where you would fill his body with water, take his head off first, then fill his body with water like it showed on the instructions on the back, and then by pumping the head up and down, he would be able to shoot out water and blast He-Man and his allies. It didn't quite look the way it did in the art, though, or in some of the entertainment, because, well, it was kind of more like less like snake vomit, I guess, or snake venom, spewing out in a giant stream, and it was more like a gentle mist on a lovely summer day. See this Mattel commercial. Yes, you could mist off Stratos when he needed to cool off. It was a great way to keep fresh in the summer. It's also interesting to note that Kobra Kahn started off as a ally or one of Skeletor's evil warriors, one of his flunkies, along with, Evil Lyn and Triclops, Beastman, etc. But once the say one thing and mean a Star Wars. Once the Snake Men were introduced, he moved from being an evil warrior, which he was even called out on in the packaging, to clearly a Snake Man, and was going to be part of King Hiss's flunkies. So he's one of the few villains that really switch sides. I guess, Rattler and Tongue Lasher also became members of the Horde, but again, story for another time. When he was updated into the Mike Young series, what's called 2000X by a lot of the fans, his story of being both a Skeletor evil warrior and a Snake Man evil warrior was, I guess, the background was expanded so that he became a descendant of the Snake Men, with most of the Snake Men lost in a portal for most of time. And when the Snake Men returned, he eagerly wanted to join them, and he would kind of be teased, or kind of like a someone pledging a fraternity. He would have to go through all sorts of I guess different nagging by the older Snake Men who didn't quite see him as their equal. They would haze him and all sorts of stuff because he wasn't a true Snake Man. He was now just a descendant of the Snake Man. But it helped explain why he switched sides from being a Skeletor flunky to a Snake Man warrior, and he definitely sort of dreamed of being a true full-fledged Snake Man, and eventually he actually did get his comeuppance on Rattler and Tongue Lasher for all the hazing. So in the 2000X line, he did get a figure, which was really cool because he was now more in that sort of skinny style versus the bulked up look that he had in the vintage line, that since all the figures shared that common buck. And he had those great claw arms. The Zodak blaster was now reimagined as like this giant thing with a projectile, but it still had that cool Zodak blaster look, which I thought was really awesome. And the hood was done as a separate piece on the back. So it wasn't part of his head, so it didn't prevent his head from moving, but there was also like a weird gap between his head and the hood. So it was kind of like coming out of his back as opposed to attached to his ears, I guess. Do snakes have ears? I'm sure they do. So there was a Staction figure also released that had him with the hood down that was more in his traditional look, but this meant looking at all the versions of him, hood up, hood down, old animation, new animation, when putting him in the Classics line, we wanted to really deliver the ultimate version, a sort of, definitive version, especially as you might see in your mind. So that meant looking, again, at all of his appearances and realizing he was actually going to take a lot of tooling because he needed a fully sculpted torso, he needed a new head, he needed more parts than we anticipated. So the idea of doing a Filmation head, while fans really wanted this, it wasn't really in the cards, especially because we wanted to do that hood up and hood down look, which meant 2 heads, not just one. And heads usually cost more because of all the deco. So unlike the 2000X figure, you could do the hood up look, and the hood was actually attached to his head, to the sides of his head, as opposed to coming out of his back and having that weird gap that honestly always drove me crazy about that figure. And he looked great, even though green on green sometimes clashes as far as packaging. I wasn't sure how we were going to pull this off and it was going to look okay, but the red of the gun and the light green of the belt really actually made a difference and made him pop in package more than I expected. And, his bio was very much a retelling of the 2000X line, where he is a descendant of the Snake Men and, essentially wants to be, one of them and, move up in their ranks. And he easily got the Zodak Blaster, which, could be repurposed. And then, of course, there's his little buddy there. Is he eating him in this shot? No, I guess he's just holding him out. So this was the little sidekick he uses to kind of free people from prison and pull off other sort of schemes in the 2000X show. When I was being interviewed by Pixel Dan at one of the shows, I joked that we were going to call him Pixel, but unfortunately the IP group wouldn't go for that, and he was renamed Fang. Sorry, Dan. I really also wanted to do something like this. Have a piece, like a clear blue plastic that would clip into his mouth to recreate what the blast should have been, the way it was depicted in art. And I wish we could have done this. We ran out of, with the tooling budget, we just could not afford this. But man, that was so my hope that we would have been able to include something like that. And even though without, the snap-on water squirting piece for his mouth, he still came out really cool, and he's one of those figures that works very well with both heads. Oh, and he got us the new boots, too, which we could later release with Skeletor, like the true Skeletor boots. So that was cool. He delivered a lot into the line, and I think he's become a fan favorite as far as classics is concerned. Is he eating that guy?